Hey everyone, welcome to our final class on the Divine Name series. And in this fifth class, we're going to explore the 42-letter name of God, also known as the Ana B'Koach. So jumping right into our subject, the number one in our ideas is the world traveler. And the reason why world traveler is because we are essentially all world travelers. We're traveling through life. And we came from a ethereal source and we're going to a place, hopefully a higher place than where we came from. And so in the creation of the world in general, on the macro level, there was also the travel of a descent of the creation for the ultimate what? For the ultimate ascent, for the ultimate elevation. And the world, we could say, is traveling in a place to reach back to its higher root form, and we, as individuals, are also travelers within the macro level. And so on a physical level, on a time level, on a place, and on a time level, and on a spiritual level, we're all traveling through time and space in order to do what? In order to elevate that time and space. And so getting to the essence, we would say, of what the 42-letter name of God is it's a name of elevation, and it's a name that elevates the corporeal world back to its higher levels. And so Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai in the Zohar, in the fourth tikkun of Tikkunei Zohar, as he's about to embark in explaining the 42-letter name of God, stands up on his feet, the Zohar says, and quotes the verse, Pitchu li sharei tzedek, that King David says, open up for me the gates of righteousness, avovam, I will enter them, odeh ka, and I will thank God, Yud Kei, the Creator. And so Rabbi Shimon explains right there in the Zohar that within the 42 avovam, I will come into them. Avovam is the letters 42. I will enter those 42 letters, letter name of God, to thank God, to thank the Creator. And so Rabbi Shimon explains that in the creation of the world, the first 42 letters of creation, starting from Bereshit, Genesis, in the beginning, Bereshit, bara Elokim, et hashamayim, v'et haaretz, v'haaretz hayta tohu v'vohu. And the land and the earth was topsy-turvy, was chaotic. And so it starts off in those 42 letters. We've got tohu v'vo, and before the hey and the vav are over, we've got 42 letters. And so within those 42 letters, essentially, we have the origins of the 42-letter name of God. They're right there within creation. And we know that there are the 10 utterances. The 10 utterances of creation. God created the world via speech, via the vibrational frequency, which we are feeling, we're privy to every single second. The world is expanding, the world is receiving from that divine energy at all times. And there's 10 particular utterances in the creation of the world. And in those utterances, we've got the root of the 42-letter name of God. So within the 42-letter name of God, there is the microcosmic power of the utterances of the Creator that is vibrating within them. So essentially, when we think about the 42-letter name of God, and we think about this idea of the world being created and traveling and being manifested, it's for a purpose. And the purpose is the elevation, which will come afterwards, and we'll talk about that in greater detail. But the idea of the elevation of the 10 utterances is ultimately to have those utterances then, or the creation itself, recognize and realize the Creator, and thereby manifest the purpose of creation. And so in the Zohar, it's explained that the 10 utterances plus the building blocks of creation, which are the letters, the Hebrew 22 letters of the alphabet. So 22 letters of the alphabet and the 10 sfirot, where God created God wanted to be able to become known via the 10 sfirot, as we explained in depth in our sfirot course, that the Creator is essentially unknown, and He's called the Ein Sof, the infinite light. And so via the 10 sfirot, the Creator is now known. And so we've got the 22 building blocks, and then we've got, which are known as the Aleph Bet, the alphabet of creation. Those are the building blocks, plus the 10 sfirot, the 10 ways that God is known. So we've got the building blocks and we've got the sfirot that are the 32, what we call the 32 pathways of netivot. They're called the 32 pathways of 32 times that it says the name Elokim within the process of creation. And that means that the name Elokim, which is the name which is hidden, God's name, which is associated with Gvura, it's a name that is also Hateva, where God is hidden within nature. And that name, that specific name, is mentioned 32 times within creation, meaning that the creative process was imbued and that was hidden within creation. And so with the 10 utterances, with another number 10 of the utterances, then we've got 42. So we've got the 22 letters of the alphabet, we've got the 10 sfirot, and then we've got the 10 utterances, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says, that equals 22. That equals 42. And that's what he says, Pitchu li shari tzedek, open for me the gates of righteousness. Avovam, I will come through them. These 32 holy divine permutations of God's name, which are found within the actual first 42 letters of the Torah, in the creation of the world, are there for the elevation of Odeka, of thanking Yud K, of thanking the creator of Odeh. Odeh literally means to acknowledge and to thank the creator of Yud K. But the Zohar explains this on a deeper level, of course. And so the 42 letter permutation name of God is a composite of 6 times 7, which has to do with the seven emotional sfirot. We've got the 10 sfirot, and then we've got the 7 sfirot, and within the 7 sfirot, we've got 6 individual sfirot. So for example, we've got chesed, the first sphira of the emotional, on the emotional level. And within chesed, we have chesed of chesed, and we've got gevura of gevura, and tiferet of tiferet, etc., going all the way up to yesod of yesod, the first 6 sfirot, which are called the ze'er anpin, the small face. And 6 times 7, we've got 42. And so the Zohar says that the elevation called the daughter of 7, Bat Sheva, the daughter of 7, that's the idea of Malchut, the composite of the 42 letter name of God is essentially Malchut, is kingship, which has to do with the elevation process as well. The idea of kingship is elevating the corporeal world, the realization from the below to above aspect. And so that elevation comes from where? Comes from the first 3 sfirot, because we've got the complete unit. And what's the complete unit? We've got Yud K, which is Chochmah and Bina. So Avovam odeka, the Zohar says, everything stems from ayeh. Ayeh is from nothingness. And so the letters of ayeh is actually 16, which is the same letters as odeh, I will thank, odeh, ka, yud ke, I will thank, the idea of reaching up to chokhmah and bina, and then above that is the aleph of keter. So aleph, yud, and k is keter, and then yud, and then k is chokhmah and bina, and then within that we've got the entire spectrum of the 10 sefirot. So the elevation process, and again on the microcosmic level of the 22 building blocks of creation, the 10 sefirot on their highest level, and then the 10 utterances are found within the 42 names of the utterances, permutations of this divine name, which has to do with the elevation, the acknowledgement of the source, and the realization, essentially, of the purpose of creation. So let's go to the second big idea, the ana b'koach. Now, if this sounds a little deep, it definitely is deep, and we're going to try to bring it down to a practical level of how to utilize that and how to meditate on these divine names when we reach that stage. But it's important to realize the power, the sheer potentiality of this name, which has a power of essentially of transformation and elevation on the highest realms, essentially the realms of the creation, of the building blocks of creation and pre-creational process. So that has a very powerful transformational frequency within ourselves, within our own creation process. When we think about this name, when we meditate upon this name, when we think about the power of this name, then that also has the power to elevate our consciousness up to the higher realms as well. So, number 2, ana b'koach. So, the 42-letter name is found within the book of Reziel HaMalach, which is one of the first Kabbalistic books that we have. But later on in the book of the Bahir, written by Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana, who was a holy Kabbalist that was 2 generations before the generation of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and he's known as just a complete holy man. He was on a completely different realm, almost not in this world. Wrote one of the most important Kabbalistic works called the Bahir, in Hebrew. And so in his book, he formulated the 42-letter names into their permutations. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai mentions this in the Zohar of the ana b'koach, that they're connected, how they're connected to the 10 utterances. And essentially, he formed them in the seven separate rows of the ana b'koach. 7 and then 6 individual columns. And so it starts off with the ana b'koach. Literally, ana b'koach means please with your strength. And so it's a supplication. And once again, a supplication is the idea of yearning for something. And when we yearn for something, we want to become elevated. When we yearn for something that we don't have, we want to have that supplication answered. And so it comes from a very deep place within, and it elevates, and the idea of that supplication or that yearning elevates upward. So the ana b'koach, the beginning of it, is the actual name that we know it as, because it's the first 2 of the letters of that divine permutation. Now, it's important to note that the Ana Bekoach Gdulat Yemincha Tatir Tzara, that first row over there, is the prayer of it, but the meditation of it is the Aleph Bet Gimel Ana Bekoach Gdulat Yud Taf Tzadik Sofit, and those are the letters that we're actually not supposed to enunciate when we pray it. We're supposed to meditate on those letters. And so it's important to note that when we say the Ana Bekoach, we're supposed to keep in mind and visualize the letters of the Ana Bekoach, of the first row, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Yud, right, etc. And keep that meditation in mind, because that power has to do with the elevation. So, speaking a little bit more about that idea of the elevation, it's brought down that this elevation of the Ana Bekoach, that prayer is said in between different phases in the prayer, in the daily prayer that we actually do. So in the morning, for example, before we go on to essentially start prayer, we raise ourselves up. As we mentioned in our course on prayer, there are 4 phases within prayer, corresponding to the 4 spiritual worlds. And from the phase of asiyah, of action, to Yetzirah, to formation, we have the Ana Bekoach over there to raise us up. So there's a raising up. It's brought down in the books that the idea of raising up has to do with the raising up from the elevation of action to of the world of action to the world of formation. And so there's an elevation of consciousness. And so we have this process a number of times during the day, and then on Friday night we have that elevation process where we elevate ourselves up again from the world of asiyah, of action, to the world of Yetzirah, because on Shabbat there's the revelation of the world of Yetzirah, and above that as well, and we have an extra soul, etc. So there's that elevation of the worlds. We mentioned this also, the Ana Bekoach, before going to sleep, before retiring, before sending our soul back up to the source, and where our soul gets the vitality for the next day. We say the Ana Bekoach before going to sleep. So that Ana Bekoach is mentioned many, many times, and in general it's good to say the Ana Bekoach whenever we need. So if we want to become elevated in our consciousness, we want to see perhaps some results in what we're doing, in whatever it is that we're doing. Saying the Ana Bekoach has a tremendous positive potential to it by just mentioning it. So the Ana Bekoach is also, moving on to number 3, related to the name, to the 21 letter name called the Ehyeh, which we mentioned in our first class. That's the name which corresponds to Bina, to intuition, to that realm of understanding. We've got Chokhmah. Chokhmah is intelligence. Bina is intuition or understanding. And that name of Ehyeh relates to the 42-letter name of God in the following way. So first of all, just a little bit of an introduction. When Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh, I will be who I will be. Where do we find that verse? We find that verse when Moses asks God for help for the Israelites, for the Jewish people who are going through such intense slavery, subjugation at the hands of the Egyptians. So he says, he says to God, how could this be? Are you going to help us out? We can't take this any longer. Please. And so God answers, I will be who I will be. Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh. I will be who I will be. And To that, the commentators say, well, Moshe said to him, it's not straight out there in the verses, but we don't want to be in other, I will be who I will be, meaning that there's going to be other types of suffering in the future, exiles and whatnot. We want this to be the last one. So what's going on? I will be who I will be. I will be with you here, but I will be with you also in the future. So Moshe says, enough. So God says, okay, tell the Israelites that shalachani aleichem, that sent me to you. And so with that, Moshe takes this name essentially, or the 21-letter name of God, and he goes into back into Egypt, and he reveals this message that they're going to become elevated, extracted out of the subjugation of Egypt. And so this name, the name of intuition, is the name which is the source, we could say, of the 42-letter name of God. So let's understand this. Let's break this down, because we know that Malchut and Gvura are connected to Bina, to intuition. And they're all on the left side. And the left side, the left column, has to do with elevation, whereas the right column has to do with drawing down. So while Chochmah, Chesed, and Netzach are all on the right side, they have to do with drawing down. We've got Hod, which is Odeh, Hod, we just mentioned before, and Gvura and Bina are all on the left side. They have to do with the elevation from below to above. Difference between water is drawn down, fire is elevated upwards. And so too, the sphera of Malchut, it says that it's elevated, it's the sphere that elevates, that comes from below to above, is elevated via the left side, and through Gvura, and through intuition. And Kabbalistically, the Bina, the sphere of Bina, is connected to Leah, to the mother, to the wife of Jacob, Leah, while Rachel is connected to Malchut, to kingship. And we've got the two, what we call the two wives, but on the Kabbalistic level, Jacob, who's the middle column, is connected to these two realms of Sphirot, the realm of Bina and the realm of Malchut, which are connected to each other because they're actually the feminine side. The feminine side has to do with the elevation process, whereas the masculine side, stereotypically, on a Kabbalistic level, has to do with the drawing down of the life force into this world. And so, Bina is it says it's the source of the children. Eim habanim smecha, the mother of the children. And says Leah had 6 children. Who are the 6 children? Those are the 6 Sphirot, which are born via that intuition, that level of Bina. And so Bina is that place that is all-inclusive. It's the source. It's where everything was formed. And so on a very physical level, the mother includes within her womb the baby, and the baby grows and goes through the 9 months of expansion within the mother's womb. And she gives birth to a living baby. And so this baby was formed from that place of the mother. So from the place of Bina is where life essentially is formed, and it's the place, it's the origin of everything. So going back to that idea of Yasher I will be who I will be, together is 42. If we take the 4 letters of God's name, Yud K Vav K, and I'm not going to draw it here, but we'll just do it like this. We've got the Yud K Vav K, and if we have what we call the Milui, the expansion, the hidden value that we spoke about in the last classes, so then we've got altogether 10, because then we've got 10 letters altogether. We've got the Yud Vav Dalid, Hey, right? And we've got 10 letters there. And then if we take the Milui of the Milui, that means that now we've got Yud K Vav K, and then we open those hidden values of the hidden value, so then we've got 28 letters at that point. So then we've got 28 plus 10 plus 4, we've got 42. So the idea of the value of the value, that idea of the expansion is a way of learning and in a way of understanding that Kabbalists had in understanding that essentially it's all within the hidden components. And so we may see just an opaque, wall or a beam of some sort, but within that there's life force. And of course physics speaks about that, and we know that there's so much, there's much more that meets the eye. And so that's the idea of the hidden value. But then there's a hidden value within the hidden value. And so that's the idea of the name, Eye Asher Eye. I will be who I will be. Within the particular, within the detail, within it all is the root and is the origin of that hidden truth. That level of intuition, that deep idea of Bina is found within all, and essentially we're about bringing it up, elevating it up to the source of where it came from. And so that's the connection of Bina to the name Membet, to the 42-letter name, the elevation from below to above. Which brings us to number 4, elevation force. So as we said earlier, the name Membet is connected to Gvura, it's connected to strength, the elevation from the worlds. The worlds are elevated. And so in the travel of the Jewish people, of the Israelites in the desert, it says that they traveled 42 travels. And they started the travel from Ramses and they reached the Jericho, the place of Jericho, over the Jordan River. And so those 42 travels correspond to the 42-letter name of God. And it says that Vayhi bin Sa'aron, that as they traveled through the desert, the ark traveled in front of them and wiped out all types of serpents and scorpions and high mountains and whatnot were all decimated in that force of the ark as it was traveling through the desert. So the 42-letter name of God corresponds to the 42 stops of the Israelites in the desert before reaching the place of Jericho. The place of Jericho is the idea of Yericho, is the idea of the smell, that elevation, coming from the lowest level of Ramses, from Mitzrayim, which is constriction, going all the way up to Jordan, over the Jordan River to Jericho, has to do with that ultimate elevation. And we know that the Baal Shem Tov says that those 42 travels are not just 42 individual travels for the Jewish people in the desert, but they have to do with the 42 individual travels that each and every person goes through in their entire life. We all have 42 travels that we're going through. We have the time that we're born until the time that we pass on and we go to the place of Jericho, that place of smell. The smell corresponds to the soul, that elevation, ultimate elevation of the soul, and where it came from is 42, equals 42. And even more than that, the Baal Shem Tov says that every single day we've got 42 travels that we're going through. And so this elevation force of the 42-letter name of God corresponds to the travels that we go through in our life. And so on a deeper level, it's explained why is it that, well, we know that there's 7 times 7 corresponding to 49. When the Jewish people left Egypt, they counted 49 rungs of the Sfirot of purifying their characteristic traits to finally be able to reach the 50th gate. And then they received the Torah on Mount Sinai on the 6th of Sivan, corresponding to Shavuot. So from Pesach, Passover, up until Shavuot, 49 days, corresponding to what we call the Sfirat HaOmer. We have 49 days, corresponding to the to the complete purification of 7 times 7. So why is it that the 42 letter name, as we said before, has to do with 7 rows times 6 of the Sfirot? In other words, it just goes up until Yesod, and Malchut itself is not included. And so the answer is given by the Alter Rebbe in Torah Or. He explains as follows, that the idea of the Sfirat HaOmer, of that purification process, has to do, yes, of course, with an elevation, but it has to do with a drawing down of a divine light. And that divine light is able to purify the lowest most realms. So we could say, from that place of Bina that they were going to, the 50th gate, corresponding to that place, they were sent a beam of light to purify themselves. And of course, they elevated themselves up, which, by the way, during the Sfirat HaOmer, there's a custom to say the Ana B'Koach right after the Sfirat HaOmer, but also a psalm in Tehillim called Lamnatzeach bin Ginot Mizmor Shir, which we're supposed to actually meditate on it, and it looks like the candelabra. And there's 49 words in that verse, in that psalms. And the difference is that when what we're first supposed to say is the Lam Natseach, and so that has to do with the drawing down of the light, while the Ana B'Koach has to do with the raising up of the light of the below to above. So there's the elevation, and then there's the drawing down. And so too, in our discussion over here, the 42 letter name of God has to do with elevating. Elevating what? Elevating Malchut. So therefore, Malchut is the actual thing which is elevated. So it's not 7 times 7, but we could say that the whole receptacle itself of the 42 letter name, as the Zohar says, Bat Sheva, the daughter of 7, that's the 42 letter name of God. The actual elevation itself is the idea of Malchut. Malchut itself is elevated, whereas the 49 rungs of the Sfirat HaOmer, of the counting of the Omer, corresponds to the 49 levels of purification from above to below. So that all brings us over here to divine energy. And as we said earlier, we're supposed to meditate on the Ana B'Koach. And each one of those rows over there corresponds to another day of the week. And it corresponds to another sphera of the 7 emotional sphirot, which unleash a tremendous, powerful energy. So on Sunday, one is supposed to have in mind the first row. On Monday, you're supposed to bear in mind the second row. On Tuesday, the third row, and so on. And so too, during different facets of our life, there's different energies that we want to unlock. And therefore, during for certain events in our lives, we want to connect to a certain energy or certain path, what we call, of the Ana B'Koach. So we want to concentrate on that. But in order to know which one it is, we have to know what their specific divine energies are. And so in the PDF notes, which is included for you, we have included the specific energies of each one of those rows, which are tremendous building blocks and that unleash that energy. So it's extremely beneficial to meditate on those specific letters and to try to memorize those letters, and whenever we can, think about them and bring them back up in our mind, and to say the Ana B'Koach again at different intervals. And they're all extremely beneficial and auspicious for bringing ourselves up, our consciousness up, and the consciousness of the world as well. realizing the whole purpose of existence is really the elevation of our corporeal, of the way that we think, the way that we look at one another, the way that we look at ourselves, the way that we think, is all that inner travel. So my friends, it's all about that inner travel, and we have to realize that these divine names and on all of our classes, they all have to do with, yes, it's theoretical and it's up there and there's so much more to learn, and for sure, and that's why we have a lifetime for that. But at the same time, it's practical, and it's about bringing and implementing these names and these tools into our day-to-day life in order to elevate ourselves and the world around us. So wishing you guys many, many blessings, and may all these divine names be etched in our hearts and in our minds, in our own hearts and our minds, and that of the entire world. Wishing you guys many blessings.